Canadian taxpayers are supporting these institutions that did these crimes, and they can get away with them so easily. So that's part of the campaign we've been doing, to say these are institutions that have to be brought to trial. We need a war crimes trial like they do anywhere in the world, and that's the only way for white society to come forward and come clean and do, to do justice finally. The government of Canada issued what they call an apology in June 2008. Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister, got up in Parliament and apologized. Now that's an important word to know, that it has two meanings in English. It can be an expression of regret. It can also mean a justification of your own actions under law. An apologetic is when you're saying, yeah, this happened, but it wasn't our fault. And that's pretty much what he said in the apology. He said some children died, some. Like, I don't think 50% death rate is some. He didn't say who was guilty. It's like they're talking about a crime, but never mentioned the churches once. And so the thing to realize, I think, is that when apology is said by the society that did it, it's very different than when the word is used by people who suffered. Like, it's a lot, as I'm sorry, I forget your name, the man who was speaking before, but he talked about the importance of acknowledging something to somebody wrong, and that is important. But the way it's being used by the government and the churches is to absolve themselves and to indemnify themselves legally for any consequence. Like, now the churches can issue a bit of money to their victims and never face trial or disclose their records or anything. Well, and when you allow that to go on, you're saying to any criminal that with enough money and influence, you can get away with crime.
Yeah. Are you aware of anything paralleling in the United States? And do you partner?
Oh, yeah, I do more and more of my work in the States. I helped with the first lawsuit, actually won against the Catholic Church last year, brought against the Jesuits for Indian boarding schools in South Dakota and Washington State. It was the first settlement. Now, of course, as usual, the Catholic Church didn't have to really pay a lot of money. Their insurance company did, and nobody went to jail over it. But they were just the same stories of atrocities. When I was listening to the survivors of those Indian boarding schools among the Low Lakota people, they were describing kids being raped and murdered, buried in back, child trafficking networks that are still going on. All of that. And so more and more of the work I do is actually cross-border, because these crimes are the same, really, anywhere in North America. And the U.S. government had a very similar policy of extermination towards Native people who wouldn't give up their land and destroy themselves. So I've found that right now there's actually in the States a really historic lawsuit. For the first time, the Catholic hierarchy is on trial. There's a Bishop, William Lynn, who's on trial in Philadelphia for covering up child rape in his parishes. Well, what came out in the trial is they had a secret archive going back over 50 years where the church knew that children were being trafficked by as many as 1/3 of all the priests in Philadelphia diocese. And they were ordered never to tell the police, because it's a policy in the Catholic Church right out of Rome, coming right from the Pope. It's called crimen solicitatis. It's a law that says any priest or bishop who doesn't cover up child rape in his parish is going to be excommunicated. So, I mean, this is enormous, because it means in any parish in the world, Catholic parish, there's a criminal conspiracy going on to protect Trappists. And so it shows you the enormities, and a lot of the work I do now is with people trying justice from the Catholic Church. I've been to Rome a number of times. The Vatican's really on the defensive. It looks like the Pope may even resign soon. So, yeah, there's a lot of work I'm doing in the States these days, and in fact, I've been on a speaking tour through the States in the fall. Yeah, I think transformation is the word. Whether forgiveness and healing happens, that's not even in our hands. I think that's the end result of something. I mean, forgiveness is something that starts a long process. It's not the end of anything. But it's hard to generalize. There's many different Indian Aboriginal nations all over Turtle Island, or what we call North America. And they're all at very different stages. I know on the west coast of Canada, people have been struggling with this for almost 20 years. They're a bit further along. In the States, there really hasn't been a big movement yet among survivors of these Indian boarding schools. But I think it's at very many different levels. And what people are learning over and over again, because I've been really at the forefront of them trying to do this, what they're learning is they can't really rely on the court system, because the first thing that they have to do is to be gagged legally, and they can't tell their story anymore. And that's in return for a court settlement with these the churches that did the crime. So people are learning that they need to develop their own means of responding to this. Some of the native nations here on the West Coast are setting up their own court system under their own traditional tribal law to try the perpetrators. They don't rely on the white courts at all. So I mean, it's at many different levels of development, but people are waking up, I think, to the fact that when you're talking about genocide and a plan by church and state to do this, it's not something that you're going to heal overnight or you're going to fix, because the system that did it is still in power. And traditionally, it's always the losers of a war who have to face justice, not the winners. And that's the dilemma we're in.
How do you see the soldiers playing the military industrial complex more and more is starting to destabilize, and the actual personnel are pulling out of this domination mind control of you to do what you're told kind of thing, even if it means killing innocent people for no reason over and over again. There's something happening, and can you identify in your own words what you see?
Well, yeah, I mean, even people in positions of authority like police and soldiers in that, when you appeal to their heart and you just speak to them about the missing children, you reach most people. Like, we'll often have protests or vigils outside churches that are responsible for these crimes. And, the priests, the clergy are often very hostile. The people going in are quite interested often. They didn't know the history of their own church and the crimes that they've done. But when the police show up, we say to them, look, you're protecting this institution that's still trafficking in children. You have an obligation to protect those children, to protect our common law right to protest. And we often talk to them, and we get them on our side. So, I mean, you can appeal to anybody, because, frankly, the people in those positions of authority know very well what we're talking about. They know these things go on. But it's like in any hierarchical organization, a corporation of any kind, whether it's church, government, police, there's a chain of command, and if the person on top is allowing these crimes, everybody feels they have to go along. What we do is you break the chain of command. You appeal to the conscience of people there in the pyramid and say you don't have to be part of that pyramid anymore, or you can step out of it. And that's the power of common law, saying citizens have the right to be their own police, set up their own courts if those courts are not protecting them. And that's an inherent right. The U.S. Constitution recognizes that inalienable right of people to protect their own liberties when the government is an enemy of those liberties. And so, that's what we appeal to. And frankly, it always works. And I think the fact that one person, myself, could have had this impact over 20 years shows you the power of it, because there's so many people out there who are being victimized. And all you have to do is show them that they can stand together and never give up their truth and their story, and we can move mountains. And I've seen that happen. So, it looks, when you work up close with people, it looks pretty gloomy, but in the long run, I've seen an enormous change happen in the last 10 years. So I'm hopeful. It's one of the hardest groups to work with, people who have been tortured or abused in some way, because there's all the post-traumatic stress reactions. There's the fact that they don't trust anybody, including themselves. That it's very difficult to get people to move past their own personal pain. But what works is, and the best example I can think of is, we had a protest once where we actually went into a Catholic church during a Mass and just peacefully stood there and talked to people. Some of the people who came in with us were native survivors of Catholic boarding schools who had been horribly tortured at a young age. Normally, they couldn't even come near a church without getting sick and having, a bad reaction. They were in there with us, leafleting people, talking to them, showing no fear. And when they left, there was this one man, William Coombs. When he came out, he stopped drinking for the first time in his whole adult life. And what did it wasn't therapy. It was having overcome his fear in the company of other people. And what I often say to people, we heal together by doing something about it, not just talking, but actually confronting the wrong. And that I think is the best way to bring people out of their pain.